Thank you, everyone, while we go back and forth, but with this hybrid setting. So for tonight's agenda, if we could go to the next slide.
Yes.
So for tonight, we're going to try to take a stab at understanding state law, specifically, but not just solely, what's called sound business practices. We want to review what vendors should be thinking about, how vendors can prepare to do business with the city, and some next steps that vendors can take. So first off, for the next slide, you'll see it's about understanding state law. So if we could skip 2 slides. Thank you. This is our introduction to procurement. So what do we mean by procurement? So here in the city of Cambridge and in many other cities, I think to some extent, you will find most of this information that is garnered here today applicable to how many other municipalities and towns do business. So here in Cambridge, procurement is the process by which city departments acquire the goods and services that they need to fulfill their mission. This can include anything from office supplies or janitorial services for our buildings. The process typically involves following state regulations and guidelines. And in the case of goods and services, we're talking about Mass General Law, Chapter 30B. Different Mass General laws apply to construction. Essentially, though, each of the processes are designed to ensure transparency, fairness, and value for taxpayers. Oftentimes, depending on the value of the project, it's going to include bidding and competitive selection to choose the lowest cost supplier. That's not always the case in every single instance of procurement, but it often is the driving factor. You'll find that city departments often can procure items either on their own under the sound business practices process, and I am going to talk a little bit more detail about that shortly, when they're operating for items under $10,000, or they're engaging with the purchasing department, myself, Shu, and the buyers that work with us, to get larger goods procured or services procured. Next slide. Thanks. In Mass, as I've stated, in other cities and towns, the cities and towns have to follow 30B when it comes to buying supplies and services. 30B defines what is meant by that phrase that you all hear very often, sound business practices. Sound business practices means that essentially the city may purchase items or services costing less than $10,000 without following one of the competitive bidding process that is required when the city's spending more than $10,000. Now, we're talking about goods and services and how this is defined in Chapter 30B, which governs goods and services. But just as a note, construction projects, albeit governed by different state statutes, also refer back to this sound business practices definition for projects that are valued less than $10,000. So the city can use sound business practices approach when doing construction work that has an estimated value below 10,000. There is a slight additional requirement when dealing with construction, and that is that prevailing wage law applies to construction projects, even those that are under $10,000. The city must provide contractors with the prevailing wage rate for the particular construction work to be done. And the quote must be based on that. And then the contractor must, of course, pay prevailing wage. So important to note here, because I think I saw one or two questions come through. Do you have to be a union shop? And the answer is no. The law doesn't require that you be a union shop to do business with the city, but on construction, it does require that you follow and comply with prevailing wage law. So switching a little bit more focus on goods and services again, this sound business practices under $10,000 generally means that departments may go to a vendor and periodically solicit pricing to ensure they're getting a good price or the best value for that particular good or service. And best value can focus on not just the price, but the quality of the item or the service and other relevant factors. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Mass General Law establishes 3 procedures that the city has to follow when they're purchasing supplies or services. We talked a little bit about that sound business practices and what it means. That's that amount that's less than $10,000. And that's the area where the city has the most flexibility for dealing with particular vendors for a good or service. There's not always a competitive process that has to take place when operating within that threshold. So essentially what the law says is that the estimated dollar value of the goods or services that you're trying to procure as the city will determine the method that the city has to use to procure those goods or services. The estimates must cover the full length of the contract, including any renewal or extension options that could exist. And the estimates have to include all the costs that are associated with receiving that supply or service, whether those be delivery charges or additional licensing fees, for instance, on software, etc. So again, that sound business practices phrase is defined as ensuring the receipt of a favorable price by periodically soliciting price lists or quotes. So when we're operating below $10,000 in value, this means, again, that a department may reach out or the purchasing department itself may reach out to vendors periodically to ensure they're getting a favorable price. Checking prices really at least once a year, depending on the market or price fluctuations for particular commodities. Even examining vendor catalogs, price lists, online, looking at vendor websites to compare prices. Any bit of searching or outreach on the part of the city is feasible when operating under the sound business practices category. It's not mandatory, but departments could choose to solicit quotes officially, competitive quotes, when operating under sound business practices as well, especially if they have perhaps a complicated service that they're seeking to get, albeit the value is below that $10,000 threshold. Next slide, please. Thanks. So when we're operating under 10,000, I think, I've alluded to it a little bit. The process of doing business with the city is easier for the vendor, and it doesn't require extensive bidding or paperwork. And what usually that means is a city department may reach out to a vendor for a formal quote. The business will need to have provided a W-9 form for their business so that they can be set up in the city system and be able to have a purchase order issued to them and then receive payment as well. The business must be willing to accept a purchase order, and a formal contract usually is not needed, but I put a little bit of a star on that one because there's a little bit of a caveat to that. And that's under $10,000, a formal contract isn't required, but there may be occasions when a contract is used, especially if there's a service that's being rendered that may have some complicated tasks or steps that should be laid out and outlined very carefully to show exactly what is going to be performed in that service. So there could be a contract, even though the value is under $10,000 and a purchase order would suffice to issue payment. For bullet number 3, I think it's important to note that accepting of the purchase order piece, because I think that can be a pain point for many small businesses. And the issue is that you receive a purchase order based on the price that you quoted to the department, and then you render your service or you provide your good, and then you wait for that check to come as a result. And that's essentially because the city, under municipal finance law, for the majority of commodities or services out there, cannot prepay for goods or services. So I just wanted to point out why purchase orders are used in the purchasing process. Next slide, please. And the next one. Tyrone, do you want me to take the next 2 as well?
No, I can take them, and if you just want to chime in, if you feel like we're missing anything or want to add, please feel free to. So before we go on to these next slides, just to make everyone aware, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat. It's a webinar, so people are automatically muted during webinars. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we are monitoring the chat and Q&A. So please feel free to do so. So for this next slide, important things vendors should know about work under $10,000. For contracts under $10,000 in Massachusetts, vendors should be aware of the following. So the first bullet point is vendors should be prepared to provide price lists or quotes upon request, even for small purchases. So what that means is a procurement contract price list or quote typically includes a detailed breakdown of the cost of goods and services being purchased, including unit price, the quantity, total cost, the payment terms, delivery schedule, and any other applicable discounts or surcharges. So definitely something to think about when you are thinking about a contract for under $10,000 with the city of Cambridge, is that information right there, as well as the next information we'll talk about as well. So vendors should maintain up-to-date profiles in the city of Cambridge e-procurement system to be notified of relevant opportunities. So as we mentioned, the city has transitioned back in September to a new e-procurement system, which is all online. We'll talk more about this at the end of how to register, but for vendors who have registered or for folks who are interested in registering, the way to be able to keep up to date with your profiles, you can go in using your email to log on and create register through this system. And then if by any chance things change with your business, you have a new phone number, new websites, things like that, information that is relevant to becoming a vendor, you can update that in the procurement system. So we definitely want to make sure about that and being notified of relevant opportunities. So we'll chat about this a little later too, but for the e-procurement system will have all the different opportunities that the city currently has, but you can filter those to different things that you are interested in. So if there's, if you're strictly interested in food or something like that, you can filter it to the relevant, contracts and things you are interested in. If operating under, if operating under a business name or other than your own, vendors must file a business certificate with the city or town where the business is located. So if folks don't have a business certificate, they can go to their city clerk's office, town clerk's office, and get a business certificate. That is one thing that is needed with doing business with the city of Cambridge. So for Cambridge residents, you can go right down to City Hall, the city clerk's office, fill out the application. There is a fee attached with that, $50, as well as getting it notarized. And then you will have your business certificate with the city. It will be filled out, and this is something that you will have. And it's definitely needed to become a vendor with the city, as well as for other resources that the city may offer to small businesses. And lastly, foreign corporations must register with the Secretary of the Commonwealth within 10 days of starting to transact business with Massachusetts. There are some exemptions. I'm gonna let Liz talk about that a little bit more because she is more aware about the foreign corporations aspect of things. So Liz, if you want to talk about that.
We do have one question in the chat that I will ask out loud. Do we need a business certificate for the city of Cambridge, even if we do have another certificate in our hometown? The answer to that is no. We just need a business certificate in the town you are doing business with, that your business is located in. I'm sorry.
Does a Secretary of State summary page, is that accepted?
Yes, if you're a corporation and you're incorporated with the Secretary of State, yes, that's sufficient instead of a business certificate.
And I think, Tyrone alluded to the foreign corporation sort of phrase, which always confused me before I became a procurement person. A foreign corporation essentially means any business outside of the state of Massachusetts, not necessarily outside of the United States itself. So the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website does provide information on what entities need to do in order to register to do business in the state of Massachusetts.
All right, so as we continue, for contracts under $10,000, businesses should make sure their quotes include key details. So clear information on who the company's point of contact for the work. So also including a detailed description of the goods and services, agreed price of payment, delivery cost if needed, and the city of Cambridge. The city of Cambridge is sales tax exempt. So as far as clear information on who is the company's point of contact, so that would be the business owner, and having that clear and concise name and the goods and services procured, a description. So a comprehensive explanation of the product or service, including its features, functions, intended applications, technical specifications, if there are some, like the size, the weight, dimensions, all of that information is helpful as well. Quality standards if applicable, as well as the delivery requirements. So the delivery time, the location, and any special handling instructions, as well as packaging and labeling. When we talk about number 3, the agreed price payment, we are referring to, this refers to the mutually agreed upon price that buyers and sellers have settled on for the particular goods and services within the procurement process. Essentially, the final negotiated cost that will be paid for the item. If that's what we're talking about, we're talking about the agreed price of payment. And then the delivery cost refers to the expenses incurred for physically transporting goods for a supplier to a company's designated location, which is considered part of the overall cost.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, Tyrone, if you don't
Sure,
mind.
please. Yeah.
Again, I got a little while with the asterisks, just to let folks know that that delivery cost, for instance, also gets factored into when we're looking at what threshold we're operating under. Delivery costs or any other costs associated with providing that product or service is calculated in the threshold. So if you were, say, providing an item that was $9,000 to the city of Cambridge, we're operating in sound business practices, it sounds like, but then if there's but it's going to cost $1,500 to have it delivered to you, now we've gone out of sound business practices, right? Because we're at 10,500. So that's the reason why I wanted to put that asterisk there, just so folks understand it is part of the overall factor of which threshold and which procurement process the city must follow in order to get the good or service. Thank you, Tyrone.
Liz,
Sorry.
Can you just chat a little bit about number five? The city is a sales tax exempt for folks who may not be aware of what that fully means.
So the city is exempt because it's a municipality from paying sales tax. Often, though, vendors will need the city's sales tax exemption form, and we can provide that to you if you need that.
Any questions so far from folks?
So just so I'm understanding that, so that means if I went and set up a quote with you guys, I couldn't charge you guys sales tax?
Correct. And we'll provide the tax exemption form for you so that you have that documentation as the seller.
And Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, if it is like, for example, we're ordering food for an event, we do pay for meals tax.
Well, there's been some back and forth on that, and presumably now the city should not pay for meals tax, but that's a discussion to have with the auditor.
Right, so we are on to how to prepare. Next slide, please. So, assess your capacity. So before you do business with the city of Cambridge or a different city or town, you should think about the following. Timeliness. Can you meet the timeline or service expectations of request? For example, if a city is asking for 1,000 widgets to be provided in 1 month, you have the people and equipment to complete that. So think about that. You know, someone's interested in possibly applying for a contract, a bid, and that is one of the specifications in the bid that the city is asking to produce 1,000 widgets in a month. And you're like, yes, I can do that. That's no problem at all. But it's you and only, you know, your one other coworker. You're the owner and you have one other employee. Are you able to handle that? You know, along with the other day-to-day operations of just running your business. Now you have to meet that contractual obligation that you have with the city. So something to think about. Can you, and you know, can you meet it in the time? Can you do it? Can you make sure that you can produce this 10,000 in this time that the city is asking for it to be produced, if it's monthly or whatever it might be? Do you have the capacity to do that? Delivery. Can you provide delivery? We often ask for items to be delivered to us at a location in Cambridge for an event. So as it literally says right there, you know, the city has different events, not only at this building or City Hall, but there are many different city departments around Cambridge. And we ask that, you know, if it's food, can the food be delivered to this place, you know, in North Cambridge? Can this business, or do you have the capacity to deliver food? Not all businesses do. Like some businesses may be like, no, you know, we only serve to certain locations, but do you have the capacity to deliver that food to this location at the time that's being asked, you know, without having to close your business, you know, to deliver it yourself or something like that? So another thing to think about. Payment terms. The city can only pay for items/services after we receive it with a term of net 30 days after we receive the invoice and bill. Can your business handle upfront costs? So after the event happens, if you're a food vendor, then we submit that invoice to the city, the purchase order to the city for you to be paid. So can your business handle that it might be 30 days before your business actually gets that money that was agreed upon through this contract? So something to definitely think about, because if it's no, then or you're questioning, I'm not too sure if I can wait that long. You know, it's definitely something to think about when moving forward with stuff like this. But if you're definitely confident, yeah, sure, so definitely can handle that 30 net pay, then definitely something good to think about. Communication, does your business have a customer support communications capacity to respond to quotes? Is there someone who can answer questions in a timely manner? So, you know, if it's only you and one other person operating a business and the city has a question about, you know, the goods and services that they're looking to procure, like, can they get a hold of you in a timely manner, and will you respond in a timely manner to those questions? You know, is it gonna be you monitoring the email or responding? Is it gonna be, you know, your employee, or do you have someone else on your team that would be doing that? So something to think about too, because you don't wanna have these emails or phone calls get lost. And you know, people are trying to reach out and get information.
Before we move on,
Sure.
is that the payment terms is 30 day, but do you guys ever make a deposits on the contracts before they start the jobs?
Liz, do you want to take that question?
Sure, I think there'll be rare instances, but extremely rare. I think in 7.5 years, I've seen it once, where the city was specially ordering something to be like made in such a way it was only going to be usable by the city of Cambridge. So what they did was the auditor allowed a small payment for the materials that was going to go into the creation of that product to be made ahead of time. But that was monitored quite closely, and it's really has to be extenuating circumstances for the city to be able to prepay and be in compliance with state law, essentially. There'll be items, you know, if you're a travel agent, for instance, where, you know, paying for airplane tickets to go to a convention or something somewhere. Obviously, there's certain industries where there has to be prepayment and that's allowed. But for the most part, no.
Thank you.
Is there any category in which like the city has a higher volume for goods and services that's typically purchased, like a category? Sorry.
Liz, Shu?
Yeah, Chu, do you want?
Thank you for that question. So that depends on, are we talking volumes of items purchased / goods purchased, or dollar amount value? Because those could mean very different things. I think as a general rule of thumb, our procurement needs are based on departmental needs. So when you think about that, basically things like janitorial services, office supplies, those tend to be something that every department may need, while there's specialized services that, for example, our community development may require, but our arts council doesn't. So those typical kind of operational needs items are much higher in volume, though that doesn't necessarily speak to what the dollar value breakdown is, because that could vary depending on the industry.
According to your payment terms, is there ever a situation where with that quote comes a proposal that could possibly adjust your net terms with maybe a newer or expedited process with a merchant setup, where you could probably pay a processing fee to expedite payment?
Do you just, I want to understand correctly, you're talking like through code, something like that?
Well, I've worked with a number of different vendors and prime contractors, and a a lot of them now are moving into the space where not only can you have option for payment. So you may have net 30, but then, as you get, closer to like net 7 or 21, because you want it expedited, you would have to pay a processing fee for that merchant transaction.
Right. So the city doesn't do that yet as a commitment to be able to make that payment that quickly. When we're purchasing off of statewide contracts, there's usually I believe it's a 15-day turnaround where an additional discount can be received by the city, but I'm not sure whether the city has ever taken great advantage of that opportunity or not.
Yeah, to add a little more onto that, there are some state contracts I think have those incentive, essentially payment incentives built into them, not all of them. But yeah, like Liz said, I don't think we have that built out as a general policy for the city.
Secondly, to add on to that, since you're saying it's a general process, has this net 30, is that negotiable, or is that a standard practice that you guys are going to consider? Or could someone come in with a proposal and adjust the addendum for prices or for payments?
So I would say net 30 is aspirational. So the city can't commit to a fast turnaround, and it can't. I'd be hesitant for a department to promise a payment within a certain time frame to get a lower price and then not produce that payment on time.
In the event that it is passed, and I'm not sure how you guys work with your funding, but in the event that it does pass the 30-day threshold, is there such a penalty or fee that we can assess as the vendor because of your 30-day net term has not been successful in its payment timeline?
I have seen occasion where there have been late fees that have been incurred. Usually the auditor doesn't authorize them, but sometimes there are rare instances where that is allowed. So that is something I would suggest to sort of make the 30-day turnaround feasible is for vendors to not provide a good or a service to a department without the department giving them the purchase order. If the department doesn't produce a purchase order for you that has locked in the price that you quoted them prior, then that means that after you submit your invoice for this good or service, then the department has to turn around and request a purchase order, and that takes time, especially if you're thinking it's after the fact. You've already delivered the good or the service. So I think your first protection against time to ensure as timely a payment as possible is to say, I can quote X to you for this. I will deliver it on this day if you produce a purchase order for the amount I've quoted.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we have another question from someone online. Is there a workers' compensation and liability insurance amount required?
Yes, usually, and that is required by state law. The city doesn't set the workers' comp requirement.
What's the average turnaround for the city between when there's the purchase order for services good and the services goods have been received to when the payment has been dispersed to the vendor? Like, what's the city's average time?
Purchasing doesn't issue the payments, and the payments are requested at the department level. So for instance, if you are providing a good to CDD, then it's CDD that will process the payables schedule. So I couldn't really speak to the average turnaround time. I can tell you my department is incredibly small. but we do have a very fast turnaround time, and a little bit because we rarely purchase one-offs from different vendors, so we're not processing massive amounts of bills or invoices to be paid. So it's faster for us, but larger departments, all departments do their own payables and they submit that to the city auditor. So I couldn't give you an honest answer about how long one department takes versus another.
So you have no idea if it differs department to department?
I would say, I would imagine it would.
Other than this structure that you have here for payments, do you guys also have an option to utilize your purchasing card for either purchasing products or services with the vendor or also paying the vendor through your purchasing card as well? And what does that process look like?
The city doesn't utilize procurement cards.
I got a little confused with the question, if you require certain insurance, workers' comp. I was confused with that. So if you run an LLC and you're trying to get a contract, do you still need the workers' comp kind of insurance? I was still confused with that.
If you're going to have a contract with the city of Cambridge,
That is
yes,
correct.
there's insurance requirements that go along with that. And workers' comp is one of those requirements, and that amount is set by state law. So we don't have, the city doesn't have flexibility to eliminate that requirement.
Is it safe to assume under, again, the state law that according to the size of your company, you may have a waiver set for your workers' comp due to the size of your employee structure on your company?
I mean, I couldn't give you that advice. That would be like a legal opinion to get from someone who could advise you on what your insurance requirements should be to satisfy state workers' comp law.
I think we'll move forward, but I think we'll have more chances for all these good questions.
Yeah, so continuing on how can you be prepared? So maintain up-to-date price lists on your website. So if you have a website and you know the prices on your website aren't currently reflective of what the actual prices are, you know, you've changed prices in the last 6 months or last year, but haven't reflected those on your website. You got to make sure that whatever the prices are, they're up to date and current as to what the prices are on your website. Because the city will possibly check and see what the prices are looking like. And, you know, the city might have one idea and then you come back with a different set of numbers. And then there's a little bit of confusion why those numbers aren't matching up. If prices are not on your website, be able to provide written quotes upon request via email or phone within 2 to 4 business days. So if someone does ask you, call and ask how much will these goods and services cost, a good timeline would 2 to 4 days to give them a response of how much these goods and services would cost. Look at your competition and think about how you could offer competitive pricing. So depending on what your business is, you know, if you're in the food industry business, look at different local food businesses and see what their prices are, and are your prices competitive to what theirs are? You know, no one's telling you have to go out and change all of your prices or anything like that, but, you know, just have a sense of idea of, you know, what your prices are compared to your competitors around you. Focus on delivering quality supplies and services. Buyers and departments consider both cost and quality. And then be prepared to share information about your products and services and qualifications, since these factors may be considered along with the price.
I have a question.
Sure.
And how are the contracts like typically awarded? Because I'm seeing a lot of in here how you can be prepared. There's a lot of like stress upon like, make sure you're competitive, you know, but then we're talking about small businesses. And so the cost of in comparison for a small business versus a corporation, you're looking at 2 different price points. So what is the city looking at? Is it the lowest bid, or is there a set aside for small businesses? Like, are you looking at the best value? Are you looking at minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses? What is the criteria that the city's using when doing contracts? Is there any sort of set-asides, like what's going on?
Liz, would you like to take that?
Sure. So right now we're focused a little bit on that sound business practices threshold. So we're looking at the under $10,000. And the reason why we're starting here is because this is exactly where the city has a little bit more flexibility, so that it doesn't need to focus solely on price. So at under $10,000 worth of purchasing, the city, again, that sound business practices means we have to periodically solicit quotes to see or ensure that we're getting a good price. It doesn't have to be the lowest price. So when we're operating under sound business practices, we can consider other relevant factors that combine to make best value of a purchase. And as long as the city isn't drastically overpaying for a particular product or service at that threshold, things are fine. When we get to above 10,000, when we hit 10,000 and we're operating between $10,000 and $50,000, that's where that more competitive process is introduced by the law. And that's when the city's focus becomes on the lowest price, but that is assuming or factoring in the fact that the vendor has been determined to be responsible, which means that they have the skill and the ability and the integrity to fulfill the contract, and that the item that's being purchased and that you've bid on is responsive to what the city's seeking. So if we're asking for, $50,000 worth of apples or red Gala apples, your business is not offering Granny Smith apples, right? So that's what responsive means, that it matches the specifications and the vendor's been determined responsible. Once those two things are in place, then it's driven by lowest price. So that's why we've started out today with this big focus on where the city has the most flexibility within the statutes, and that's when operating under sound business practices. So we can consider more than just the price.
And next week we'll be going into the higher level contracts. So Liz just kind of highlighted, and the week after that, it's even beyond the 50K. If I understand correctly, so we're kind of doing a series, like lower contracts, mid-level contracts, and then the higher level ones.
So for this low level tier, what I'm understanding is, that you're getting a good price, but not necessarily the lowest price. So what's considered to be a great value? Can you be more specific for someone that's looking to bid on a contract, so that way they have details on what's considered as factors?
So, for instance, a best value would be, you could determine, it could differ from department to department, for instance, and even from procurement to procurement. And so what I mean by that is, if I'm a department and we're in the middle of a project and we realize we need X, like let's stick with widgets, right? Because they're that universal commodity, a widget. We need X widgets and we needed them very quickly, and we need a lot of them, and we need them brought to us. So all of those are factors. So a department may reach out to a few different vendors. One vendor could say, I have all of them in stock. I can bring them to you and it's X price. Another vendor may say, I can bring them to you, but you've got to wait 2 days and they may be cheaper. The department could go with the higher priced one because the other relevant factors that meet that department's needs, like I need it right now, I need it brought to us, has been met. So does that answer the question?
So what I'm hearing in summary, the 3 factors would be speed, delivery, and cost. Are you able to deliver? Are you able to deliver in a timely manner? And the cost. Would that be a summary of what you're saying as far as factors?
that was a summary of the factors for that example. And as I said, the factors could differ from a department to department and based on the situation at the time. So it's a case by case approach of what is the best value to that particular procurement by the department that needs the item or the service. So that example just highlighted what could be 3 factors. There may be many other factors that we don't even contemplate at tonight because we're not in the situation of the purchase.
Can you please, if not tonight, then follow up an email to the registered attendees, all factors that could be considered for under a 10K bid by all departments. This way we have a good idea of when placing a bid by department, what to be in consideration besides these 3 factors.
I think we can provide you with something that we would say is a non-inclusive list. So that something may inadvertently be left off, but we'll certainly sort of come brainstorm and come up with some of the things we think you all would be interested in meeting so that you could be prepared for some of these procurements. Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, so as we were talking about the slide before, maintaining updated prices, as we can see right here, we have an example of a business that has a catering menu with their prices based on the number of people. So as you can see, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 1 is student package, then number 2, signature package, and number 3, the hot deal package. And they each have different prices, $12 a person, $14 a person, $16 a person. So this is very helpful if the city logs on and to goes to this person's website, this business's website, they have a clear picture of what the prices are gonna be. If they're interested in the signature package, which is $14 a person, and getting 50 signature meals, they know that's gonna be $700. They can quickly do the math. 14 times 50 is 700. So right there gives them a clear sense of how much they might have to pay if that is the business that they're going with. So that's just a clear example of a business here in Cambridge that has their prices listed on their website for their catering. So something to think about just when we talk about having up-to-date prices and relevant prices. And then this next example is a business that has an online portfolio showcasing their work with clients. So literally you can go on to this company's website, look at their portfolio, and they have up-to-date portfolio of all the business that they've done with different clients, and you can see their work firsthand of what they do. And it gives the city a better sense of, the projects that this business has worked on, and if this is something that the city is interested in moving forward with, you have that clear picture of the work that they can do instead of, it just kind of being written out in sentences and paragraphs. They can go and literally see the work firsthand in pictures. So perfect examples of what's happening. So Liz and Shu, if you want to take this one over.
Sue, do you want to take this? Actually, is this an event form for CDD or is this?
You can take this one if you want. So basically this is actually where the vendor has an own form on their website to get an understanding of the type of quote that someone may be looking for. So for example, this is just a vendor that happens to do events. And so they're asking the person who's interested in working with them to explain what they want, what date they wanted, what they need. They're showcasing what they offer for their events. And so we're again using this as an example of maybe if you don't want to have your prices on your website, you at least have a form on your website or or at least an email address on your website where people can fill it out get information about what a quote would look like. And so you could, easily, you could imagine you're filling out this form, you're saying what kind of event you're doing, and then someone at the city or a different company for that matter, it doesn't have to be necessarily the city of Cambridge, would respond, would get an email back saying, thanks for your interest. We can provide you this event on the day you're asking for X amount of dollars.
And this next one is just one last example of a printing apparel firm that has a pricing calculator that you can just get a sense of what the price will be if you're ordering shirts. You can go, I want pricing for t-shirts or shirts, whichever type of shirts you're looking for. If you want embroidering on those shirts, digital printing, you can select different options as well as how many you would like. And if each shirt's gonna be the same, if each shirt's gonna be different, and then and the quantity, and then once you plug in all that different criteria, it will give you a price of how much that will be for that total amount. So that's just useful information, that the city can get a price right away of how much things might cost instead of kind of having to look through a website that doesn't have this information and then having to either call or email and try and get a hold of the business owner. Right there, that information is on hand by just entering the information that they're interested in. So something to think about when moving forward with doing business with the city, having the prices, making it easier for the city to find prices and get those prices, a sense of what the prices might be, just makes the whole process easier. So for folks who either aren't or interested in doing business with the city, or folks who already have, thank you for registering as a vendor. But for folks who haven't yet registered as a vendor, we've already mentioned that the city, as of September, transitioned to a new e-procurement system, and you can register at that system at the email, the web link right there, procurement.opengov.com/sign up. And all you need is a valid email address. Upon initial sign up, you receive an email from OpenGov with a link for further account sign up. And then also there is so you will want to complete your W-9 form, which will be provided there, and upload that to your registration. So that way, and literally that's all you kind of need to move forward with registering to become a vendor. Sign up to register and your W-9. And then it's kind of that easy for folks who already haven't registered but are interested. We have blank W-9s that you can fill out and leave with us. So we'll make sure Liz and Shu, who are joining us in the purchasing department, we will get those W-9s to them. And if it's easier for you to register just online by going to this link and clicking, and you can upload the W-9 that way as well. There's a blank W-9 form provided there.
One question before we move on, do we need to go into OpenGov to confirm if we completed the sign up process?
So there is, oh, sure.
Sorry, I can take this one. And actually, if you want to hit the next slide, it'll actually begin a very brief overview of what that sign up looks like. To give a little background, we began this rollout of the new e-procurement system for us in an attempt to broaden our reach, to give vendors a more accessible platform, as well as to make it easier for people to bid and submit with the city. We finished rollout around actually November was final rollout. And we've been using it since, and this is kind of the platform where we will be doing all of our bidding, all of our quote requests for the most part for the city. When you sign up using that link from before, you will just plug in a valid email address and you'll get this kind of OpenGov sign up notification with a link to activate the account. Once clicking on that, it'll bring you to OpenGov where you do the very basic account setup. Essentially, it'll require you just to have contact information, company information. There are additional fields for additional information, but most of that is not mandatory. I will point out that if you want to hit the next slide. Yes, thank you. So there are a couple things I do want to point out. One is once you've done that basic information data entry to set up your company, I highly suggest you select the category codes that are in the category section of your company description. What these are a bunch of broad-based indexes of different commodities, different goods, different services used by all government entities. There's 3 options for you there. The NIGP codes, the UNSPSC, and the NAICS codes. All 3 are different, essentially, indices of goods and services. For matter of reference, the City of Cambridge primarily uses the NASPSC codes for our identification. So I highly suggest you select the category of goods and services your business offers using those. And that's a way you can search for opportunities using those categories. It's also a way for us to find vendors that offer those services when we're in the system and looking for folks to solicit quotes from. In addition to that, once you've done that initial setup, you can go back to our Cambridge procurement page and just hit that subscribe button. What that'll do is it'll automatically notify you of open opportunities that we issue. And you can set the notification settings to be all solicitations or only those that correspond with the codes that you've selected so that you're not getting bombarded with emails. And I'll also mention while I'm here that this is a platform not just for our city, but across the country. So simultaneously, you should have access to all the cities, towns, municipalities using the platform, and they'll likewise have access to your services. And just by matter of, as part of our outreach, we've already heard from several vendors that they've already received notifications, even though they've signed up through our platform, from other towns and cities, across the country that have been looking for their services, and they've gotten requests for quotes. So I highly suggest folks to just go in, do the basic sign up, and then either enter your code, follow us, or follow any other towns that are local or you're interested in. I hope that answers the question as well. So if you go into the OpenGov system, you should see like your company profile, and that's really all the basics that we need. If you follow the City of Cambridge, you'll start getting those notifications, I assume, in the next week.
Do you mind if I just add also, once you do set up and register in the system, check your junk folder for your emails, just to be sure that if you got an OpenGov notification or then say a procurement solicitation from the city, that they're not landing in that junk folder.
So here we have develop a quote, key items to have on your quote. So we have handouts for folks who are here in person of quotes. And for those of you online, you can see this. Number 1, the company's information, your business name, address, and logo. Number 2, the date of the quote and the company point of contact. Number 3, provide a clear description of items or services being sold, number of items, cost per item, and total price. Number 4, time required to complete the service or product. Number 5, when dealing with the city or other government agencies, remember we are exempt from sales taxes, but not meals taxes, which we already discussed earlier. And number 6, include delivery fee and or tip and / service fee. And that is just an example of a quote right there on the right-hand side. Any questions about that quote?
So just to clarify, this is what we mean as an example written quote that we would require.
And lastly, we have take advantage of city programs. So if you are in need of equipment and marketing assistance, check out the Small Business Enhancement Program. That is the link. If you are in need of a website to upgrade your website, click on the Small Business E-commerce Program. For workshops and other programs, you can go to that link right there. And for some of our Society for Diversity information, that bottom link right there. Please keep in mind that some of this information, some of these grants are strictly for Cambridge businesses. So just something to keep in mind when looking on the city's webpage and our EOD webpage and stuff like that, that keep in mind that some of these programs and grants are only for Cambridge businesses, but there are workshops and then stuff simple as just as tonight that are welcome to everybody. So just you can go on the website and check stuff out, and you'll see the requirements that there are for different grants or different programs and opportunities. Question?
Yes, can a vendor request feedback on unsuccessful bids to improve future bids?
Good question. Liz, is you want to take that one?
Absolutely. And absolutely we'll take it. And absolutely, yes, you can request feedback. Especially when it comes to what you'll see next week when we're doing invitation for bids or formal requests for quotes. We're more than happy to get feedback from the departments who have to make a recommendation to move forward with the vendor under those competitive processes. And if for some reason they're rejecting someone that may have offered the lowest price, they have to document for us the reason why they're doing that. So we're more than happy to provide that feedback to you.
And just one more question underneath the sound business practices. I get that you guys have divided them by like under 10K for the contract opportunity versus 10 to 50 or larger. What's to stop a corporation, like a mega corporation from going into small bids under 10K? How are you guys, do you guys like look to see the size of the business for under 10K? I was just unclear.
Okay. So I think the two things that come to mind for that. First, I want to respond that we haven't separated them. That's state laws separated those processes. So it sets those thresholds for us and tells us what we have to do under them. So what the city does is under sound business practices, the city's able to take better advantage of to which vendors it reaches out, if that makes sense. And so often, but this doesn't need to be the case, but oftentimes you will see that they are smaller and often more local. And by local, I don't mean Cambridge only businesses, but certainly businesses within the general geographic area, because they can do that fast turnaround for us on the smaller commodities and services.
Thank you. And are there any like regular networking events to meet the city procurement officers?
Pardis, do you and Tyrone want to take that?
So we do have a supplier diversity event fair, which we've had the last 2 years in a row, partnering with MIT. It was in October of last year as well as the year before. And we have had our city representatives as well as other city representatives. And not only just from different municipalities, but Harvard was there representing MIT. We had Takeda, we had a bunch of bigger businesses. We had Cambridge Health Alliance, a bunch of different places came, probably had, I think it was close to 25 different procurement offers from different institutions and companies were there for the supplier diversity fair. So we are in talks right now of figuring out what we're going to do this coming year regarding our supplier diversity fair. So please be on the lookout for that. But yes, that is how the last 2 years how we've had an opportunity for folks to get in front and talk to purchasing agents in the city. Yes.
And you said it was on what month?
It was in October last year and the year before. We're still trying to figure out exactly when we'll be doing it this year, but definitely we will be on the lookout for that information. We'll have it posted on our city websites and newsletters and everything else when we figure out exactly what our plan will be moving forward.
I have a question, and this is just because of experience with this type of situation. And I don't want to discourage other small business, but what is the initiative here with small businesses trying to set up bids to get the contracts? And how valuable or how important is past performance history in that equation. Also, understanding that, I guess you guys already have your current vendors, doing work for you guys already. Is this a push, and I get it because you guys just changed over to the new, platform. Is this a push now to get everyone moving on to the new platform? And is there also assistance for the small businesses to assist with the bidding process in competition with those that are currently bidding?
Pardis, do you want me to take a piece of that first?
Sure.
So I think while we would love to have as many vendors as possible move over to the e-procurement system, that's not the reason why we're doing these events. The city transitioned to the e-procurement system to actually make it easier for vendors, including small businesses, to be able to participate in the city's procurement processes. And, by way of example, to try to drive home what our thinking was about this, now a business, including a small business, can submit a competitive quote via the internet to us, right? By accessing this e-procurement system. Whereas in the past, vendors, especially responding to bids, had to come and do it in person. Which, if you're a small business, you can understand the logistics and how difficult that could make things for you. If you're bidding, for instance, on a competitive contract that's valued at over $50,000, to either have to rely on a courier to deliver it on time to the right department, or to hand deliver it yourself by a specified time in the bid documents. So the e-procurement system is really just trying to use technology to make the city more approachable and accessible for vendors who may not be able to take time out of their day to ensure that the quote or the bid has gotten to the city. So I think, that's the first piece. And yes, we are encouraging everyone to sign up, and we hope that they do, because otherwise we've transitioned. This has been futile, and we could have conducted business as usual going on and not reached the vendors that we're really trying to reach, which are those who never really had access to the city before. And that's why purchasing in CDD is really driving on the outreach to vendors for us, is to cast this wider net and to become more approachable. And I know, competitive procurement especially is very daunting. And when you start to look at contracts from the city for, if you're operating over that $10,000 value, it's hard to be a business person, and especially a small business person, and try to deal with paperwork and conduct your business at the same time. And so we're just trying to find ways to make outreach and to welcome people, vendors, in to the system.
And I get it, I said a lot, and so just to kind of recap, and I'm not sure if I heard the answer to this, but does past performance history on the bid proposal, is that one of the key factors on aligning with getting the work?
Yeah.
And if a person is a small business who doesn't have that, what does that look like for opportunity to help ensure that they can, have some type of, incentive of getting that bid? Do you guys have some kind of outreach plan? Is there a team in partnerships with your current vendors? What does that look like on a networking scale?
So to answer your question about past performance, I would say that past performance, especially on a prior city procurement contract, is more often than not a reason to reject a lowest price bidder. If the city was in contract with a bidder who didn't perform as required under that contract, I think one would more likely see that would be documented, and the city would use that as cause to not move forward with a recommendation to award the contract to that particular vendor. Past performance, for instance, I think in the way that you're proffering it for this question is maybe for those newer businesses who may not have had the opportunity to perform contracts either with the city of Cambridge or with other municipalities or other clients. And that can be a factor in certain commodities, although the city has been looking at reducing what departments ask to be experienced for certain contracts. So past performance, yes, if it was negative, it may be a cause for a rejection, but if it just doesn't exist, then that depends on what the department's needs are and what their expectations are. And the city is actively looking at loosening up what are some of these requirements. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
So we have some questions from online folks. One is, any price advantage to Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office certified small businesses, something like a percent, like 5% incentive factor to maximize the participation of Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office certified diverse small businesses on purchases less than 10K.
So is that question, do we look at under 10K? Would we be looking at someone who was certified but maybe charging more to give them the contract?
That's an incentive factor. Lucas, if you'd like to clarify your question, feel free to do so. Or maybe, oh, sure. 1 second, Lucas. Go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yes, Elizabeth, and I think you got a point. So some government agencies, they allow us, for instance, King County in Washington State, they gave 5% advantage for small certified diversity business, and so we can kind of have some price advantage compared to bigger players such as Walmart, Amazon, and yeah, this is really great to help the growth of small micro business, especially diverse the women-owned, minority-owned business.
So thank you for clarifying that for us. So when we're operating under sound business practices, we're not focused solely on price, right? So we just have to make sure that it's a reasonable price or a good price. So the incentive factor wouldn't play into that because a department may choose to go to a vendor under sound business practices that say charging $5,100 for a commodity versus a vendor who's charging $5,000 for a commodity if there are other relevant factors that that particular department deems applicable to that particular purchase. And that's why we keep saying, like, under this $10,000, we have more flexibility as a city to not be driven by price alone.
Gotcha. Thank you for your info. By the way, is there any diversity purchase targets for the city of Cambridge?
We do not have a set aside program, but right now we don't have a percentage target that's set, other than to know that we desire to increase our spending with diverse and small businesses.
Thank you. That sounds great. Thank you.
And Lucas, if you have access to the chat, you'll see that some of the other folks who joined us tonight have highlighted some of the programs that the state provides that are also set asides. And I would just say a lot of the questions you're all asking are great ones that we're all really looking into, and very much appreciate the feedback about how we can improve our supplier diversity here at the city. There was another question in the chat around if food orders are all on the procurement platform. So I don't know if Shu or Liz, one of you wants to describe how not all, or maybe I'm answering it, not all items under 10K are necessarily in the, are posted online.
You basically got that right. A lot of our food purchases, in fact, are not done through the e-procurement platform, given that they're under, or typically, we're talking about catering services for maybe a few $100s to maybe a few $1,000s. So within that very low threshold, we do have several both seasonally and annually bids or quotes that are food related, food procurements. These are kind of bigger projects that are throughout the course of the year that are through the OpenGov platform, but I think the majority in terms of frequency of usage, those kinds of smaller purchases are not through our platform.
And if I can add to that too, that comes with the, a little while back, several slides back, I talked about, please make sure, when we were talking about how long it takes to get a check in payment from the city of Cambridge, when we've said, please be sure that the department has given you a purchase order that has been issued by the city for the particular commodity that you gave them pricing on. And that would turn around, the payment a little bit faster. This is certainly one of those instances where departments will be reaching out. They'll want to have a particular price quoted to them. They'll go over the terms, like where it has to be delivered, the time, et cetera, et cetera. And this is great to then say, yes, I'll do this with the production of the purchase order beforehand, please, because that will help cut back on the time to get paid.
I guess I would just say one of the things we've been doing internally, especially for like restaurants and other things, is we have provided to all the departments the city's diversity directory. So if you're based here in Cambridge, I definitely encourage you to doing that. And then also, we also have links to the state's supplier diversity certification, as well as the city of Boston. So if you're certified by either entities, definitely know that different departments are searching those platforms to find vendors that they can get quotes from as well. Two other questions came through the chat, but before I get to those, does anyone here in the room have a question? Sure, go ahead.
Earlier you mentioned like Cambridge-based businesses. I'm also curious, does like just being a resident of Cambridge, is that part of the consideration at all? Like,
yeah, I mean, Liz and Shu, you can talk about, I don't know how it affects procurement, but when we say Cambridge-based business, especially around the programs Tyrone was highlighting, yes, being a Cambridge resident, if you're a resident, maybe your home-based business, or you're just interested in like starting or participating in one of our programs, you are definitely eligible to participate. But we did want to be clear that some of the grant programs that Tyrone highlighted, obviously you have to be here in Cambridge to take advantage of those. So there are two questions in the chat. One is, what's the department's plans with the new initiatives that was recently announced with Mayor Ruth's the City of Boston partnership? And that's actually pertaining to certification, Jeanette, not to procurement itself. Though we do talk to the City of Boston team to learn about different practices from them. So I can take that question if you don't like. For those who are not familiar, a few months ago, the City of Boston and the City of Cambridge partnered, or signed a partnership to work on, getting more, women and minority-owned businesses certified, because a lot of people are not certified, and that's one of the ways we track, who we're doing business with is certification. And the city of Boston has a easier, certification process than the state does and other entities. And so we are working with the city of Boston to ensure that more people, especially here in Cambridge, our business owners are getting certified. You do not have to, obviously, if you live in your businesses in Cambridge and you want to be certified by Boston, you don't have to be based in Boston. That's the nice thing about Boston's program. So that is, Jeanette, our plans are to ensure that more people in Boston are getting certified, and they're being accounted for in all different processes of procurement, whether they're with the city of Cambridge or otherwise. Another question, maybe Liz or Shu, you can answer this one, is what plans are in place to monitor the hiring of percentage of minority businesses per project? And what is the accountability if it's is in place if the targets are not met?
Can we get some clarification on that question, whether the hiring of percentage of minority businesses, is that, I'm trying to see if that is in relation to construction projects, or is it something else?
Nicole, if you'd like to unmute yourself and clarify your question.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Often I see, I'm from Boston area, so often I will see when I'm looking at projects that there is a percentage in minority women participation, whether it be 5, 10, 15%. So my question was, on a particular project, if it's listed a percentage of minority participation, how is that being monitored per project? And if those targets are not hit, then what's the accountability, if any?
So are these for construction projects?
Yes, I'm a painter.
Yeah, so
Service, yeah.
for construction, there are minority business enterprise requirements. That is actually not run out of the procurement department. It's overseen by the city's equity and inclusion department. They're in charge of working with contractors to meet those particular goals, and then for following up and monitoring them.
Are there any other areas besides construction?
The city, yeah, the city generally doesn't have, for instance, an MBE requirement tied to goods and services contracts. Usually, especially in the service area, the city has in the past operated under the assumption that the individual firm that was applying for the job was the one that was doing the work, and doesn't have any other like subcontracting requirement tied to those. Unless they're incredibly large contracts, they're usually not ones that sort of are open to assigning it to others as well in order to perform. So I think you see that mostly in the construction world.
Yeah, so I hear that you say the some small job, couple thousands dollars of those small jobs are not posted on the procurement. Where do we get those information? That information that if we want to bid on those little jobs.
So that's great. And one of the reasons why we're doing these different events and workshops is to sort of reach out and cast a wider net to vendors. One of the things that I think is helpful is if you're going to one of the networking events that CDD holds, they'll be purchasing people there, and you can bring your business, whether it's a menu or your business flyer or something, to give that to city staff. And there's also generally representatives of other large city departments at these events who do a lot of this sound business practice purchasing on their own. And it's an opportunity for you to get word out about your firm to them.
We have some more questions in the chat. One is how much does experience in providing a particular service weigh in receiving a contract?
I think we talked a little bit about this before, is that, you know, experience and performance. Different departments have different requirements for the amount of experience that they want a vendor to have had. I would say for something that's really a complex service, contracts especially, it may be difficult if one doesn't have the experience to be able to show to a department that they're capable of performing. And we're getting departments to loosen up what they view as a necessary experience for some of these contracts. But it can be very difficult without prior experience to be able to say, yes, I can do X, right, within this time frame and for this amount.
I do want to acknowledge that there's some comments and questions around our efforts around the disparity study report. And so I do appreciate that. And one of the things that we're trying to work on is actually providing the public and city council with an update around some of our efforts. So while today was a workshop is about introduction to kind of city contracting, I do want to acknowledge the questions people have and that we're not engaging on that, but that we hope to update you all soon with some of the other policy initiatives that are being asked about. We do have a question. How do general contractors fit into bidding? For example, if I see a repair job and have a team that I work with that can execute the job, can I still bid?
Okay, so that would be, I'm assuming, a construction project. It depends on the value of that particular contract. If you're under $10,000, really, I would say if it's small projects that you're taking on under that $10,000 threshold, the city's operating under the same sound business practices as it would do for goods and services. So you want to make sure that you're registered as a vendor with the city, that you filled out the W-9 form, and that you're set up in our financial system as well, so that if departments are looking for contractors who do a particular commodity on that smaller scale, that you're already set up in the system. And they can find you in that way. If you're bidding on the formal bid construction projects that are out, they'll be also in the e-procurement system as well. So if you're registered in there and you sign up for the particular commodity or construction that you do, then you can be notified of any bids as those come up.
Any other questions, either in person here or online?
So just want to highlight this is part one of 3 weeks of programming. This is kind of the introduction. A lot of folks have been asking about bidding, which is kind of next week's beginning of next week's class, where I think Liz and you'll be going over an actual bid or an example bid. So hopefully that will be helpful to people who are interested in those projects. And again, I do want to really appreciate the feedback and questions around our supplier diversity efforts. This is one component of what the city is trying to do, which is demystify or help make procurement can be really difficult to understand, and how the city has to follow state law around these policies is really difficult. So one of the goals tonight and for the rest of the 3 weeks is to make sure that Some of these things are easier to understand, and you kind of understand what the city asks for when they are interested in doing business with you.
Yeah, so if we don't have any further questions, we appreciate everyone joining us either in person or online. We hope to see you next week for the second part of the workshop series, introductions to written bids and proposals. And we will be sending everybody the slideshow presentation as well as links to our supplier diversity webpage and our glossary, as well as other information that we've chatted about tonight. And this was also recorded for folks who may want to go back and watch and then learn some more stuff. And yeah, we just appreciate everyone taking the time to join us for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.